is, you just adapted and pivoted specifically on your message, right? The messaging, you kept it the same, yet, can you kind of speak to that point? Because I think so many people, when there's this pivot that's needed, most people tend to sometimes throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? So like you stayed on focus, you stayed on your message, even though that message was now no longer about you being on stage, it was about you virtually preparing yourself and presenting yourself. Could you speak to that? Because I feel like the messaging piece is, obviously you've created a whole business around messaging and the fact that messages need fixed.
Yeah, no, and I mean, it's a great point because for me, it was that, I think that first few weeks, it was sort of this sense of like, well, how do I pivot or what do I do? How do I change things? And truthfully, it just became, it was very much being aware of the different environments that we were currently operating in. And so two things for me was, strictly from a messaging standpoint, I started incorporating virtual presentations, virtual pitches as part of the information I was putting out there on my website and social media. But also, I think about the awareness of what everyone else is going through. And so in the, when I was on calls with people or on interviews and things like that, I was always acknowledging, that, hey, this is a challenging time we're going through, and being very aware of that. Not being tone deaf, especially in those first few months, to the fact that this was incredibly jarring and scary. And, not trying to sort of doom and gloom it, but just really be conscious of that. And I noticed that naturally, as I noticed other people as we got 6 months in and that kind of thing, that sense started to taper off. And people were now kind of into a bit of a routine. And so I followed suit. And, I think that's a hallmark of any good messaging. It's just always being aware of your audience, what's going on in their world, what's their mindset and their perspective. And, sometimes you can feel that very intuitively, and other times you have to, be very strategic. Sit down with your team and say, okay, here's what's going on. How are we messaging slightly differently? What's our strategy? And being very conscious of that. Because the worst thing, and we've seen this now as obviously 2020 has progressed, that organizations that are tone deaf to what's going on in the world, be it pandemic, be it other social activities and events, can really be detrimental, and kind of pulls the curtain back on your organization, and for a lot of people, not in a good way.